show where we talk about games. I'm Max.
And I'm Kaila. Last time we did a quick overview about one of our favorite trading card games, Magic: The Gathering. Today we're going to tell you about everything you need to know to be able to understand what it says on one of these cards and about card types and their basic functions.
But before we get into the episode, we've got a pretty special announcement to make. We are going to be hosting the first ever Magic Saturday Night Smackdown. It's going to be a 4-player Commander exhibition match. We're going to live stream it on YouTube and on Facebook.
And we've got some of the 4 best players that we could find here on the island to be playing the game.
It's going to be on Saturday, October 2nd. We're going to stream it live on Huike's YouTube channel, and we've got a Facebook event. We're going to be live streaming it to Facebook Live as well. And the recorded version is going to air on channel 54. So if you watch this show on your TV, don't worry, you're not going to miss it.
Mm-hmm. Super excited. It's going to be really cool, guys.
Oh, and of course, commentary is going to be provided by yours truly, the host of the best and most popular gaming talk show on all of Hawaii.
Mm-hmm. Probably the only one, but who's counting?
I'm banking on that. It's the only one. Okay, first things first, lands. The foundation of any Magic game is land cards like this one. There are 5 types of basic lands. Each one can be tapped to produce a different kind of mana. They are
mountains, which produce red mana.
Forests, which produce green mana.
Plains, which produce white mana.
Islands, which produce blue mana.
And swamps, which produce black mana. Some spells can be played with mana of any color, while some other spells require mana of a specific color in order to be played. Lands that are used to pay for spells are then tapped and then cannot be used again until they're untapped.
To show that a card is being tapped, we turn it sideways, like this. So if I want to cast a spell that costs 1 green mana, I turn a forest sideways and say I'm tapping a forest to create 1 green to play this spell.
There are more types of lands besides basics. Some create more mana than others, some do other things entirely. But for today, we're just going to stick to the basics. The goal here is for us to teach you how to read and understand the cards for yourself, because there's just too many cards to go over every single one and what they do.
Now, aside from lands, there are a few different types of cards that are called non-land cards or spells. There are different types of spells, the basics being creatures, artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, instants, and sorceries. Many of these non-land cards will also have subtypes as well, which would be listed right after the main type on the card. We'll go over subtypes as we get to them.
We'll start out with elements that are the same for pretty much all the cards, and then we'll move on to elements that are unique to different types of cards.
This is a spell's mana cost, or how much mana you'll need to spend in order to play the card. You can use mana of any color to pay for this number, but for each of these symbols, you need to use 1 mana of that color. So this card costs 4 mana of any color and 2 black mana, and this card costs 3 mana of any color plus 1 blue and 1 red.
This is the card's name. Each card name is unique, so even if it has different artwork or came from a different set, it would be considered the same card as the others with the same name.
This is the card's type. Each card type works a little bit differently from the others. Creatures, enchantments, artifacts, and planeswalkers are permanents, meaning once they're played, they stay on the battlefield. Sorceries and instants are usually put into the graveyard after they've been played and their effects have happened.
This symbol tells you what set the card is from and its rarity. Neither of those things have anything to do with how you played the game, but knowing what rarity and set your favorite card come from is kind of cool.
This is the text box, the most important part of the card. Regular text tells you what the card actually does.
This is the meat and potatoes of Magic. Play a card, do what the card says to do.
Italic text is just there for flavor. It's usually a quote that has something to do with whatever the card is depicting. So sometimes the text box can be a little hard to read for people who are new to the game. And each different card is going to have its own unique rules and abilities, so it would be impossible to go over them all in one video. But we can shed some light over some of the more common terms you might find.
Target means a card or a player that you choose. It's usually followed by what you actually need to target.
So target creature would be any card you want, as long as it's a creature.
And target artifact an opponent controls would be any artifact that's on your opponent's side of the field.
Spell, or non-land, means any card that isn't a land.
Technically, cards are only considered spells in the moment that they are being cast. So if a card says counter target spell, that means that you can stop your opponent from playing a card that they're playing at that moment. Not that you can counter a card that's already had its effect done.
Symbols or words before a colon are the cost to activate a card's ability. Some abilities don't have a cost, but are instead triggered by certain things happening while playing the game. This symbol means tap. So if you see this, you have to tap the card, meaning turn it sideways, in order to do whatever it says here.
Destroy means to put a permanent or permanents into the graveyard. Similarly, sacrifice means you choose and put one of your own permanents into the graveyard from the battlefield.
So if you play a card that says destroy target creature, you can choose any creature on the board and send it to the graveyard. However, if a card says sacrifice a creature, you must choose one of your own creatures to send to the graveyard.
Exile means to remove a card from the game entirely. You don't put it into the graveyard, you put it in a separate pile somewhere else, and it's not considered part of the game anymore.
Unless a card says otherwise. Some cards let you interact with cards that are in exile.
Remember algebra? X in Magic is a variable. So, for example, a card like this costs X to play and has a power and toughness XX. That means that you get to choose how much money you pay for it, and it will get stronger the more you spend it at the time of casting. So if you pay 1, it gets 1 power and toughness. If you pay 5, it gets 5 power and toughness, and so on.
There are other costs that you can pay X for, depending on what the card states that X is supposed to be paid with. It can be X life, or sacrifice X creatures, etc.
There are some other terms that are a little bit more specific. We'll get into those later when we cover combat and spellcasting in more detail.
Okay, so those are some of the things that you'll find on a card. Now let's get a little more in depth. Here are the different types of cards and some of the features unique to each of them.
Here is the most basic component of any Magic deck, aside from lands, a creature.
Here's the creature's type. This creature is a worm, so any card that says it does something to worms will affect this card, and also any other card that says worm in this spot.
This is the creature's power and toughness. Power is the number before the slash, and toughness is the number after the slash. Power is the amount of damage a creature does when it attacks. So if this creature attacks you and you don't block, you will lose 5 life points.
Toughness is the amount of damage a creature can take in a single turn before it dies. So if this creature takes 6 damage all in the same turn, it dies and goes to the graveyard. But if it only takes 5 damage, it stays alive and replenishes any lost toughness once the turn ends. Now, the most basic ability that every creature has is to attack. You do this by tapping the creature and declaring that it is attacking. Your opponent may then use one or more of their creatures to block.
If your opponent blocks, the attacker and blocker deal damage to each other equal to their power, and if either of the creature's power is equal to or greater than the other creature's toughness, that creature is killed.
This means that one, both, or neither of the creatures may die.
Okay, now what we said just now sounds pretty complicated. So here's a few examples.
Okay, so if I attack Kaila with Dread Presence, and she decides to block with Haunted Dead, Dread Presence has 3 power and 3 toughness. Haunted Dead only has 2 power and 2 toughness. So Haunted Dead would die, but Dread Presence, having only received 2 damage, would live.
In this case, Arcanist Owl has 3 power and 3 toughness, and Dread Presence also has 3 power and 3 toughness. If they went up against each other in this case, they would both die.
Now what if Kaila comes at me with a Leliana Steward, and I block with Sanitarium Skeleton? They both have 1 power, and they both have 2 toughness, meaning neither one can do enough damage to kill the other. So in this case, both creatures would survive the combat.
We like to affectionately call this bouncing off each other.
If your opponent doesn't block, then your creature deals damage equal to its power directly to your opponent's life total. Once a player's life total reaches 0, that player loses.
Only untapped creatures can block, so it's important to decide strategically which of your creatures will attack on your turn and which ones you'll be ready to block with on your opponent's turn.
Many creatures can do other things besides attack. That's where the text box comes in. Creatures can be basic and vanilla, or have special abilities too. Because creatures are such a large part of the game and have so many different abilities and keywords to go through, we'll expand on them and on more abilities permanents can have in a different video.
This is a sorcery. Sorceries can only be played on one of your main phases during your turn. You pay the card's mana cost, play the card, and then do what it says to do. Then it goes into the graveyard. Simple, right?
This is an instant. It works the same way as a sorcery, except that you can play it at any time. Your turn, your opponent's turn, between turns. You can even play it to interrupt something your opponent is trying to do. Okay, so I'm gonna tap 5, and I'm gonna play a Gilded Lotus.
No, in response, I'm going to tap a blue and one of any color, and I'm gonna play Negate to counter your Gilded Lotus.
Cool.
So no.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That goes to the graveyard.
This is an artifact. Once you play it, it becomes a permanent on the battlefield, and you get to keep benefiting from its ability as long as it's there. Artifacts can have many uses and are very versatile.
This is an enchantment. Enchantments work very similarly to artifacts. They go on the board and keep doing their thing until something makes them go away.
Finally, this bad mama jama is a planeswalker. Planeswalkers work a little differently from other types of permanents and are almost considered to be another player. Think of them as like your little sidekick helping you out. Check it out.
This is the Planeswalker's starting loyalty.
These are the Planeswalker's abilities. You activate these by changing the Planeswalker's loyalty by the value printed here. So to do this one, you take away 2 loyalty, but to do this one, you add 1 loyalty. In most cases, you can only activate loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers during one of your main phases and only during your turn.
Okay, now here's where Planeswalkers get weird. If your opponent has a Planeswalker on the board, you can choose to attack them or the Planeswalker during combat. And each creature you choose to attack with can target either the player or the Planeswalker. Their creatures can block for them or for the Planeswalker.
When a Planeswalker takes damage, it loses loyalty equal to the amount of damage it's taken.
When a Planeswalker's loyalty reaches 0, it abandons you and goes to the graveyard.
It goes bye-bye. And that's it. Now you know how to read a Magic card.
Magic is a really complicated game. Don't feel bad if you didn't get every single little thing the first time around. Watch this video as many times as you need to, or feel free to comment down below if there were things in there that just didn't make sense. Both of us will be on the lookout and answer questions about any of the stuff that we talked about.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 2 of How to Play Magic the Gathering. Keep an eye out for our next episode, where we will go over different keywords for creatures and different abilities for permanents.
Don't forget, we've got a Facebook group, so if you want to be more involved with the show, you can check us out on Facebook. We'll put the link in the description if you're watching this video on YouTube, and if it's on TV, I'll put a QR code right there in the bottom corner of your screen. You can scan that with your phone, it'll take you right to our Facebook group.
Thanks again for watching. Bye.
Bye. Cool.
Peace.
All right.